Thank you for coming. And This is me. I'm Cecile, and I'm an introvert. I've been working in the mobile and gaming industry for the past 15 years or so, at King, at Gameloft, and being based in different locations in Asia, Europe, Latin America, and I've worked on dozens of games. But the reason I'm here today is because I didn't want to share my room. Last year, King held its annual internal event, King for Market, where the whole company meets in one location and exchanges in best practices and network and have a great time. It's a much anticipated fun event, and I love it. And each time I've attended, I've loved it. But in events such as these, and in a similar way, events such as GDC as well, I feel drained by the constant buzzing of people and networking and socializing with everyone. It uses up a lot of my energy. And such events like these, you often have to share rooms, and without true privacy, it's difficult to fully recharge your batteries, how lovely your roommate is. So I volunteered to be a speaker because that is how I would get to have a private room. And what a better topic than the reason why I volunteered to be a speaker in the first place. And here I am today. I'm going to try and use this time together to give some insights and examples of typical behavior of introverts and how to identify them, embrace them, and at the end, some tips on how maybe we can create a better environment for everyone. I want to start by mentioning the TED Talk and the book from Susan Cain, Quiet, which I watched a year ago or so, and which was truly inspiring and which blew my mind. I recognized myself so much in her experience about being an introvert, and it really resonated in me. And I had recently done MBTI test, personality test, and I was only starting to understand what introvert meant, what being an introvert meant, and getting more information and watching that talk and reading Quiet really helped me to get some more insights of how it truly worked. And I also learned that 1/3 to 1/2 of the population identifies as an introvert to some degrees, because introverts, you don't have to be like a full-on introvert. You have all shapes and sizes. But 1/3 to 1/2 is quite a big number, and I was very surprised by that, especially considering that there was not a lot of awareness until recently about what it was. So what exactly is an introvert? And the first thing I learned is that it's actually a biological difference. It turns out that the brains from introverts and extroverts behave differently. And one difference relates to how the brain reacts to dopamine, which is a chemical in the brain which controls the motivation to achieve goals or to earn rewards. Both introverts and extroverts have the same amount of dopamine in their brains. What the difference is in the reward network. The brains of extroverts is more focused on the dopamine reward network, and it explains why they are maybe more motivated for things like such as money or social status. And on the contrary, the reward network that in brains of introverts relies more on acetylcholine, which focuses on more inward rewards, such as attention, learning, and memory. And they basically feel less excitement from surprise and risk. And that's also the reason why introverts are more comfortable in a quieter environment, while extroverts thrive in a stimulating and social environments. It also explains why introverts need to recharge their batteries by spending time on their own or with a very small group of people that they trust, and that quieter environments are where they are at their best. So one thing to clarify also is that being an introvert doesn't mean that you're shy or that you're antisocial. It's just how you get your energy and where you get it from, and also what happens after the stimulation. And that being in a social environment will mean that you need to recover from it. I don't know if you ever heard the concept of an introvert hangover, but which means that after an event such as GDC, for example, I'm going to need to spend some time on my own just to go back to myself. And in similar situation, introverts might tend to dislike small talk, and especially in a social networking situation. Like, what am I going to do with all those business cards, you know? And making lots of contacts might not mean a lot to them. So, but social networking is a reality of the professional life. So maybe putting yourself an objective of making one or two contacts, which you can have true, meaningful conversation, can be enough, and then they can take the pressure off themselves so that they've achieved their goal. And another thing is that a lot of introverts, like myself, might actually feel guilty for not being able to engage as much in social activities as naturally as extroverts do, or for wanting to be alone. They might feel that they're not putting enough efforts to fit in, and they are failing in some way at social events because they just want to go home early. And this is a bit highlighted by the fact that our modern institutions tend to highlight extroverts' behavior as the good way of being, you know, being cool and comfortable in social situation, and to teach us that this is how success is achieved, that extroversion is a strength and that introversion is a weakness that you need to overcome, which I don't necessarily think is the best message to give to all of us. As a child, as a student, as a young woman entering the work environment, I've always thought that there was something wrong with me in some way, and I never really managed to be quite the person that I felt the society wanted me to be. And preparing for this talk, I went through my school records and to see what teachers were saying about me at the time. And they all said that serious student, she works well, but they would flag that I had one big flaw, and that was that I wouldn't participate enough in class, and I was too quiet. And I always felt that it was a bit unfair because I would, if I were asked, I would answer, would have healthy relationship with my classmates, I would behave well, I would do the work. The only thing that I wouldn't do would be to raise my hand and draw attention to myself unless absolutely necessary. And did this mean that I wasn't good enough? I'm not sure it does. I was just displaying an introvert behavior that is quite common among the population, but school taught me that was a weakness. Another example, I remember one summer I was about 14 and I was in language immersion holiday, spending a few weeks in a family in Ireland to practice English. And for me, holidays meant books, lots and lots of books. I had to have a big suitcase so that I would have enough to last me for the whole of the holidays. And I'll just comment that airplanes' weight luggage policy are not meant for introverts. And I've done quite a few holidays like this as a teenager. Being in a foreign family has its challenges. You're living with strangers, you may or may not speak the language well, and they just have a different culture. It's all different. And this family, they had 4 kids, and it was the noisiest house I had ever been in. My own home was a very quiet one. But I loved it. These people were warm, welcoming, and interesting, so I actually had a good time. But me being me, at night, you know, when it was time to go to bed, well, I would go and read my book. And in the morning, you know, before like getting myself ready for the day, I would read a little bit. And if there was a moment during the day when I didn't have anything special to do, I might probably take my book and read. And then one day, I get a call from my parents asking me if something's wrong. Like, wrong? No, nothing's wrong. Why do you ask? The family actually had phoned my parents to say that there was a problem, that I wasn't socializing, that I was rejecting them, that I was avoiding them. And to them, how I behaved meant that there was a problem. And I felt really, really bad that they felt that way, because that was the least of my intention. And so I left my books for the rest of the holidays, and I tried to spend as much time as I could with them, like I was on social duty, you know, and like waiting for some sign to be like, is it okay for me to go to bed now? Um, and when I think back about that experience, I think it's a bit of heartbreaking, because it's just that we didn't understand each other. We didn't know that I was behaving normally and they were behaving normally. And what also blew my mind when I listened to that talk from Susan Cain is that she recalled an example from her own childhood, which was actually very similar, where she had to put away her books to have fun with others. And and uh, and it's only when I listened to her that I realized that I hadn't done anything wrong during that holidays. I had just been me. And Susan Cain had done the same, and she was fine. And that meant I was fine too. I think knowledge and awareness is really what makes a difference for us to have better relationships together. Upon my research for this talk, I listened to lots of stories from people, you know, saying how it is to be an introvert and whatever. And there's one particular anecdote that came coming back, and that a lot would confess that at work, when they really wanted to be alone and needed time for themselves, they would go to the bathroom, the only place where they could achieve true privacy. And so now it's my turn to confess on stage, you know, like at work, I go to the bathroom when I just want to be on my own. I don't have a bladder problem, you know, nor any other kinds of problems. I just want to be in a place where I can turn my senses off, you know, and yeah, and just recharge. And one can argue that, you know, why the bathroom? You know, that's not the nicest of places to do that. And yeah, I agree. But in the work environment, and especially in this era of open spaces, this is the only place that you can be truly on your own. You don't have a glass wall. You don't have someone who's going to come knocking on the door and saying that they need the room, hopefully. And no one finally finding you, you know, to ask you that something that they've been meaning to ask forever. And the noise and the lack of privacy of an open space can be overwhelming. And it is important for introverts to find spaces where they can recharge their batteries. In some companies, they do cater for that need, and you can have some private spaces or some small non-bookable rooms that you can go into, or you can just work from home remotely without it being a fuss at all. And I think these are good solutions to make introverts feel more comfortable. And not only is it better for introverts, you know, for them to be better, but it also means that they will be more productive and efficient because they feel better and that they are in an environment in which they can be at their best. And it appears that oops, that's not supposed to be that slide. Well, it appears that the modern world has forgotten the value of alone time, and that in several religions, you have someone going on a journey in a wild and deserted nature and then coming back with a ton of wisdom that they then share with the world. Buddha, Jesus, Mahomet, you've got lots of examples like this. And even Superman has his own fortress of solitude, right? And it's only after he goes there and spends a significant amount of time alone, you know, learning from his crystals and stuff, that he truly becomes able to embrace his potential, his powers, who he is, and that he is ready to save the world, you know, from all the threats that are coming. So what does your own fortress of solitude look like? And this is my message to introverts, like allow yourself to find it and to tune in to this space that is there for you, and find that wisdom that is there only for you and that you can only find if you spend time within yourself, and then come back and share it. And to leaders, recognize the introverts in your team and let them have that time, because if you want the best of them, if you want them to be able to give you those unique creative solutions that only they can find, you have to give them this environment. In our work world, group work is very important. We do a lot, and collaboration is important. And everyone, whatever their personality types, need to be able to work in a group. And introverts absolutely can be part of a team and work in a group project. But then again, that's not necessarily when they will be at their best. They might be not as comfortable expressing themselves in a large number of people. And how can we set an environment to get the best of both worlds? And there are things to take into consideration. There are a number of studies that show that people tend to follow the person who speaks the loudest in a meeting, that is the most eloquent, that is able to present their idea the best. But that doesn't mean that their idea is indeed the best. It just means that they presented it better. And so how do you make sure in your team that you focus on the best idea rather than on the idea that is presented best? And an example, in meetings, in brainstorming, you have ways that you can avoid that. And at the end of the presentation, I have some tools for that. As I mentioned before, introverts and extroverts have different brain chemistry. And there's also it has also an impact on what paths the thoughts take inside the brains. And the path for extroverts is shorter than the path for introverts. And what it means is that for introverts, the thoughts come in, and then it's analyzed, it's going this place of the brain, and then you think about all of the multiple scenarios that can happen or not happen, discard them, and there's a lot of going on. And you need for all of that to be done before you can actually react. So there are good things about it, and there are bad things about it. The good thing is that it allows you to think very deeply on a topic. The bad thing is that the reactivity is not as fast. So how do you ensure that you get the best of introverts in a situation, so that you give them the time to process the information and actually come back with the answer? I remember once having a discussion about a profile that we were hiring for a position, and someone said that one of the requirements for the person to be hired was they needed to be outspoken, because otherwise they would get eaten in meetings. And that was a very puzzling comment to me, because in the meeting is not necessarily, where everything happens. You hear what's being said, and then the loudest and most outspoken person is going to take a fair share amount of time, and to get most people to see their point. And then people go away to do whatever is their thing. But what the introvert might do is then go back after, like a couple of days later, and say, speak to this person or this other person. And then you might get an email afterwards saying, oh, well, we didn't take into account this and this thing. And so we slightly changed the outcome. My point with this is that introverts might not win the battle in a meeting, that's for sure. But that doesn't mean that they cannot win the war. And it's important to focus when thinking about hiring about what is the result that you want to achieve rather than how you want it to be achieved. Introverts are statistically less likely to be chosen for leadership positions than extroverts. And it is curious, though, because introverts can make great leaders. They tend to be more careful in their approach and to be less likely to take oversized risks. And also, there was a study that showed that in some situations, a better outcome with introverts leaders was more likely because they would let the team, they would be more likely to let the teams run with their own idea rather than be excited by what the team is doing and then maybe not giving them the space to be able to do whatever they're doing. And Gandhi or Rosa Parks are examples of introverts who become great leaders. And they did not take the lead for the pleasure of being in the spotlight. It might have been a bit reluctant. It might have made them uncomfortable, but did it because it felt right. They didn't see a way around it, and they did it brilliantly. And there lies a point, though. Introverts tend to keep their souls to themselves. They have great ideas, and maybe they are thinking things through very deeply, but they fail to share it. And they have a lot to bring to the society, but they don't necessarily express it. And maybe because of that also, people misunderstand them. And I have an example of my own life that made that very, very clear to me. I've been taking some accent softening classes. I'm French. You probably couldn't tell. Those classes were well worth my money. And in the group, the teacher gave us an assignment, and we were to pick a celebrity speaking with an RP accent and impersonate them by copying a speech or interview that they would do. And I chose an interview from Emma Thompson when she's commenting about getting a star on Hollywood Boulevard, and she's being witty and silly, and it's extremely funny. I will spare you my impression of Emma Thompson because that is not the point. The point is that as each people in the class did their own impersonation of their own celebrity, and we would each give each other feedback. And I went last, obviously. It was a volunteer basis. And I did my bit. And I was very surprised by the feedback I got. None of it was about my accent. Probably because it was perfect. But what they said was, wow, who is this person in front of me? So much energy. It's like, you were so vibrant, like, I didn't know you had that in you. I was like, well, I was acting, thank you for the compliment. But also, I was surprised because when I was participating to these classes, like, I was engaged, like, I was listening, and like, in my head, lots of stuff was happening. But it's only when I got this feedback that I realized that all of this was happening inside my head, and that no one else was aware of it. And it really hit me that if I don't show what's inside, well, no one is ever going to see, no one is ever going to know me, truly. Because it doesn't show. So that is my other message. Like, let it show. Let it show. And I had a great pun that I forgot. But it is important. It is important. And so there are 3 takeaways from this talk. One is embrace your need to be alone. Go on that journey. Find your fortress of solitude and get that inner wisdom. And then share it. The second one is adapt group work to cater for both types of personalities. And the third one is let it show. Show your inner world to everyone around you. Not all the time, but when you feel comfortable once in a while. And I also wanted to share, and this is my last bit, little ideas how to create environments for all personality types. The first one is create awareness with personality types. So for those who went to the Quantic Foundry talk, it's not necessarily perfect. It's not necessarily completely accurate. There are different degrees. But what I think is great is to create a conversation about what the tendencies of your team are and to discuss them. And don't just do the personality test and then forget about it, but like follow up, continue the discussion. The second point is to put everyone on the same level so that they can have the same chance to express together. For example, video conferences, having a room full of people and one person alone on their screen. I have been in that situation a lot of time. It makes it so much more difficult to participate. If everyone is on the same level, it removes some barriers to speaking out. In brainstorming, I think that's a very well-known one, but I will tell it anyway. Start by giving some time, like 10, 20 minutes at the beginning, where people write their ideas on Post-it in silence. And only then, once everyone's done, then do you share them, so that every idea gets a chance, and you have time to reflect. And the ideas are not influenced by others. If you have a meeting where you really want to get feedback from people, consider sharing the agenda and the material, like a pre-read material ahead, so that people who want to be prepared have a chance to do their research before the meeting. And you can start the meeting by asking people what topics they want to be discussed, so that you can make sure that it does get discussed. Say no to back-to-back meetings frenzy. So my own schedule has looked like that, and I know that no one likes it, introverts, extroverts, no one. But what I think is that this tells you when you have to think about what. There is no time for creativity. There is no time for finding your energy or anything. So just conscientiously say no to such a schedule. But say yes to flexibility, working remotely, and not as a favor, but just as something that is normal for people to do, to be able to work at their best. And in your open spaces, create some private spots where people can go and be on their own. And the last point would be make time for pauses and silences, so that people have time to digest what you're saying and come up with the answer that they have inside themselves. And that's it. Thank you.